Hai teman-teman Liputan 6 SCTV, Anda menyaksikan Sedang Viral bersama saya, Gracia Bentobing. Global energy markets are facing heightened uncertainty following US and Israeli strikes on Iran at the end of February. That uncertainty has deepened with the UAE's surprise decisions to exit OPEC, the world's largest oil producers group, and tensions had already been building, with the UAE pushing against OPEC production's quotas as it seeks to raise output. Add to that broader political strains with the region, including differences with Saudi Arabia over Yemen and Sudan, as well as the response to Iran. All of this comes as the standoff between the US and Iran continues to threaten the Strait of Hormuz, a critical global energy route. So the question is, why has the UAE chosen this moment to leave OPEC, and what could this mean for global energy markets? We're going to talk about it with John Defterius. Thank you so much for joining us, Liputan Mr. TV, sir. I'm going to ask you directly, how significant is this move by the UAE to exit OPEC? And from your perspective, what impact will this have globally?
Well, number one, I think we need some context here because the UAE and the rest of the OPEC members, 12 before the OPEC exit, if you will, by the UAE May 1st, are living by historical quotas. And this is the biggest challenge because it's almost standing still and not recognizing who has money to invest, who has access to the proven reserves, and who are the low-cost producers. So the UAE made it very clear. In fact, I met Make It in the Emirates in Abu Dhabi, and Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, who's the group CEO of ADNOC and also the Minister of Advanced Technology and Industry, said this was not a political decision. It was an economic decision. And sources I've spoken to, because I've covered energy for CNN, for better than 2 decades, told me that they were considering this up to 6 years ago, kind of making the analysis. And they were kind of intensely lobbying inside OPEC, saying, look, we're investing billions of dollars into our fields right now. We are a low-cost producer. We have associated gas, and we want to become a gas exporter. You use gas here in the UAE as well. But we're almost handcuffed into a historical quota system. So it's Saudi Arabia, Iraq, the UAE, number 3. And the UAE made it very clear they have capacity now for 4.7 million barrels a day. Their quota is 3.3, and they were going up to 3.5 million barrels a day. They're going to go to 5 million barrels a day of capacity in 2027 with capabilities to add more. So if you're kind of restrained by the structure and you say, we're a low-cost producer, we're also investing heavily in renewables through Masdar, over $100 billion worldwide. We can't be constrained because we're diversifying our economy. We want the money to which to do so. They have 77% of their GDP now is outside of hydrocarbons. So it was that economic decision. I recognize what you're suggesting about the politics, but they left the politics out of OPEC. Now for OPEC, I think it's going to be a challenge because Iran is kind of hamstrung by the fact it doesn't have foreign direct investments. So it's producing around 2 million barrels a day. If the situation normalizes with Iran, they're going to want to go back up to 4 million barrels a day. So in that environment, the UAE would have to say, okay, you're letting Iran go back to where it was in the past, and we're saying we want to go to 5 million barrels a day. It was just easier at this juncture when there's a pressure on prices and there's going to need more supplies coming after the Strait of Hormuz is opened up, to make sure that they have the freedom in which to hit their aspirations, not the OPEC quota aspirations that we're living under today.
Okay, so to what extent will the UAE's exit impact OPEC's ability to control global oil prices and supply? What do you think about it?
Okay, number one, the mandate for OPEC is not to control prices, but to actually balance the market between supply and demand. That is the mandate. In fact, they never talk about prices. But let's say, what is the Goldilocks price for today's global economy? It's certainly not $110 to $115 a barrel, which puts a lot of pressure on countries like Indonesia. That's very, very clear. But if you say you balance supply and demand, you get a price of $75 to $85 a barrel, that works for consumers, but it also works for the producers. Now, the other challenge, for example, of the UAE, they have like the United Nations of investors in their fields, all the international energy companies, CNPC of China, we have Southeast Asian investors into the fields here. If you have those investors, they put money on the table. They need to see those revenues themselves, so not to have that constraint. I don't expect the UAE is going to change and flood the market for the sake of producing 5 million barrels a day. But I do think they have that freedom to meet consumer demand and the demand of countries like Indonesia. I would almost say that having the UAE with that freedom, it could spell relief for Indonesia because it could have a reliable producer that has about 2 million barrels a day, not confined to the Strait of Hormuz, because they have a pipeline going to Fujairah, which is south of the Strait of Hormuz, gives them more flexibility to meet the needs of Southeast Asia and the largest economy there, Indonesia.
Okay. Let's talk about the rest of the OPEC members. Talking about the rest of them, could this move encourage their, other countries to leave OPEC, and what would that mean for the organization's future?
Well, so let's be honest, this is the largest producer that has left OPEC. So it is a bit of a shock to the system, and they have about 9% of proven reserves. So the UAE out of that mix clearly changes the game. I talked about Iran and the impact Iran could have when the situation normalizes, because they have an incredible amount of proven reserves. They have 20% of the proven gas reserves around the world. So that's something that Saudi Arabia and the other OPEC players need to deal with. I covered OPEC since the late 1980s. We have, producers come and go, right? Qatar left a few years ago, but it wasn't a major oil producer. It's a major gas producer. So this is a challenge, having a country at the heart of the GCC leaving OPEC. But I would say that the UAE wants to be a responsible producer. They don't want to drive down prices, but they have the demand of the investors they have in right now, the major energy producers, also the major institutional investors from Wall Street are invested in the UAE. So it gives them the freedom to maneuver. It's going to be a tough job for OPEC to convince everybody to stay in, not because of the UAE leaving, but because we have so much pressure coming from U.S. production. I mean, the U.S. is the largest oil producer in the world today. It's 13.5 million barrels a day last month. And you have Russia and the other OPEC plus members like Kazakhstan and Azerbaijan. So it's a tricky game to keep OPEC plus together and OPEC together. But OPEC's not going anywhere. Many people have written stories about the death of OPEC. That's not the case here. It serves a very critical role of balancing supply and demand today still, and I think that's the case. But if you cannot solve historical quotas that are applied to 2026 and targets for the UAE in 2030, and you can't give them that flexibility, I think it was a pretty wise decision to kind of go their own way.
Okay, so if we are talking about the quota constraints, without OPEC quota constraints, how much do you think the UAE realistically increase its oil productions, and what would be the implications for these global prices? Of course, you said earlier it's not about the prices, it's supply chain. But what do you think about it, sir?
Okay. Number one, officially, they've said they're going to go to 5 million barrels a day next year. So that's no surprise. That's capacity. And they'll export that amount if there's demand for it, right? They're not just going to throw it out into the market. But one thing I should mention here, Gracia, is that at the start of 2026, oil prices were at $60 a barrel. And there were worries that it was going to go below $60 a barrel because there was so much supply. There is not a supply challenge right now. It's a constraint on the Strait of Hormuz, which is 1/5 of global exports. So strategically, we should kind of keep in mind, if you go back to the start of the year, we had plenty of oil around. It's just the bottleneck, the chokehold on the Strait of Hormuz, which I expect to finish, in the next month or two. It's going to be bumpy for everybody until the fourth quarter of this year, because you've had so many tankers sitting with, deliveries ready to go. And some of the fields have shut down because they couldn't exit the Strait of Hormuz in terms of their supplies. Number two, there's a medium-term challenge in the oil market right now. As I said, we started the year at $60 a barrel, but in the medium term, you have countries like Mozambique, Tanzania, Angola, Senegal in Africa that have made major discoveries. If you look at Latin America, Brazil, major producer. Venezuela is opening up as we speak. Guyana's come to the market, and Argentina is going to be coming full throttle in about 5 years. We're not going to have a shortage of supplies. This doesn't help Indonesian consumers right now because they see the prices going up. The government's providing subsidies to these consumers right now, so it's expensive for Indonesia. But this is a geopolitical risk that's on right now. If you unlock that geopolitical risk, then oil will flow again, and we could have this challenge of going, say, from $110 a barrel down to $70 a barrel rather quickly if we solve the political problem.
Thank you so much, John Defterius, Senior Advisor APCO Worldwide, for your explanation. Dan teman-teman, itu tadi wawancara kami dengan John Defterius sebagai Senior Advisor APCO Worldwide. Kami akan hadirkan sejumlah wawancara penting lainnya di Liputan SCTV. Saya Gracia Ben. Sampai jumpa. Bye.